There is an era rising right now, and no one prepared you for it. Not your parents, not your teachers, not the system that trained you to obey, achieve, and repeat. Because this era does not reward comfort. It does not reward blind positivity. It does not reward the mask you learn to wear to survive. It rewards the person who has walked through fire and discovered they were never fragile to begin with. You were built in pain, but you were designed for power. And tonight, we are going to uncover the 5 truths about this new era, the psychological shift that separates those who break from those who rise. There is a moment in every life when the illusion shatters and you realize the pain was never random. It felt random when it happened. The betrayal, the rejection, the humiliation that burned so deeply you could feel it in your chest. You asked, "Why me?" You replayed the scene in your mind 1,000 times. You searched for logic in something that felt cruel and chaotic. But here is the first truth most people never dare to confront. Your suffering was not an accident. It was an initiation. Modern psychology has begun to catch up to something ancient traditions always understood. Research published in the Journal of Traumatic Stress describes what is called post-traumatic growth, the phenomenon where individuals emerge from adversity with greater resilience, deeper relationships, and a stronger sense of meaning. Not because pain is pleasant, not because suffering is romantic, but because something inside the human psyche is forged under pressure. Pain does not automatically destroy you. Unconscious pain does. When pain is ignored, denied, or buried, it festers. It turns into bitterness, projection, self-sabotage. It leaks into your relationships. It shapes your decisions from the shadows. You think you are choosing freely, but you are reacting from a wound you never acknowledged. But when pain is faced consciously, something extraordinary happens. Think about the moment you were underestimated. The day someone told you that you were not enough, that you did not have what it takes. In that moment, something inside you shattered. The image you had of the world cracked. The naive belief that effort alone guarantees fairness dissolved. Yet at the same time, something else awakened. A sharper perception, a deeper awareness, a refusal to remain blind. This is the paradox of initiation. The breaking is also the awakening. Consider the young athlete who is cut from the team. For a brief moment, identity collapses. Dreams feel foolish. The world feels hostile. But for some, that humiliation ignites something far more powerful than talent: hunger. Michael Jordan was cut from his high school varsity basketball team. That rejection did not define his ceiling. It revealed his obsession. It forced him to confront his weaknesses, to train with a ferocity that comfort never would have produced. Or think about the entrepreneur whose first business fails publicly. The embarrassment is suffocating. Friends whisper. Family questions their judgment. But in the ruins of that failure, illusions are stripped away. They learn what no textbook could teach them. They develop instincts forged through loss, not theory. Pain is an initiatory fire. It burns away fantasy. It exposes arrogance. It confronts you with the parts of yourself you preferred not to see, your insecurity, your envy, your fear of inadequacy. And here is what makes this initiation sacred: it forces you inward. When everything external collapses, you are left alone with yourself. No applause, no validation, no comforting narrative, just the raw question. Who am I without the approval, without the success, without the image? Most people run from this question. They numb it with distraction. They rush into the next relationship, the next achievement, the next identity. They try to outrun the discomfort. But those who stay, those who sit in the silence and allow the pain to speak, they discover something transformative. They discover strength that is not performative. They discover boundaries they should have set years ago. They discover anger that, when understood, becomes clarity. Pain becomes a teacher, but only if you are willing to listen. In this new era, comfort is abundant. Distraction is constant, but depth is rare. And the ones who carry true depth are almost always those who have suffered consciously. You can feel it when you meet them. There is a quiet steadiness in their presence. They do not need to dominate the room. They do not crumble under pressure. They have already faced their inner chaos. External storms do not terrify them the way they terrify others, because they have survived worse within. The initiation you went through, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the failure, was not proof that you are weak. It was the threshold between innocence and awareness. Before the pain, you may have trusted blindly. After it, you learned discernment. Before the pain, you may have depended on approval. After it, you began to build internal validation. Before the pain, you may have feared confrontation. After it, you understood that silence can cost more than honesty. The wound was not there to end you. It was there to mature you. And here is the deeper layer most people never consider: the qualities you admire in others, resilience, wisdom, emotional depth, calm intensity, are almost always born from suffering integrated, not avoided. You were not meant to remain untested. You were meant to be refined. Every initiation demands a death, the death of naivety, the death of dependency, the death of the false self that believed life would unfold without resistance. But what dies is not your essence. What dies is your illusion. And what emerges from that death is a version of you that sees more clearly, stands more firmly, and moves with a power that comfort could never manufacture. Your pain was not random. It was the doorway. And whether it becomes your prison or your power depends on one decision: whether you choose to face it consciously or let it rule you from the dark. Before you ever understood the word identity, you learned how to survive. You learned it in silence, in subtle glances, in the tone of a parent's voice, in the way love was given or withheld. As a child, you were not weak for adapting. You were intelligent. You studied your environment the way a scientist studies patterns. You asked, without words, what must I become to stay safe here? If love was conditional, you became pleasing. You sensed that approval brought warmth and disapproval brought distance. So you performed. You smiled when you were hurt. You achieved when you were exhausted. You made yourself small or impressive, depending on what earned affection. If chaos surrounded you, you became hyper-aware. You monitored every emotional shift in the room. You developed radar for tension. You learned to anticipate explosions before they happened. Your nervous system became finely tuned to danger, even when none was present. If weakness was punished, you became armored. You swallowed tears. You hid fear. You decided that vulnerability was unsafe. Strength became your disguise, even when inside you felt fragile. These adaptations were not flaws. They were brilliant strategies. They protected you. They helped you navigate environments you had no power to change. But what protects you at 10 imprisons you at 30. The mask that once secured your survival can quietly suffocate your authenticity. The pleasing child grows into the adult who cannot say no. The hyper-aware child becomes the anxious adult who cannot relax. The armored child becomes the partner who cannot open their heart. And here is the tragedy: many high achievers today are not driven by purpose. They are driven by old wounds wearing expensive suits. They chase promotions, applause, followers, recognition, not because they consciously desire status, but because somewhere deep inside, a younger version of them is still asking, am I enough now? Look at the modern workplace. Burnout is rising at alarming rates. In 2019, the World Health Organization officially recognized burnout as an occupational phenomenon. This was not random. It was a signal. Millions of people are operating from survival mode in a world that now demands self-awareness. Survival mode is efficient in crisis. It is destructive in stability. When you live behind a mask, you are constantly performing. You are scanning for approval. You are filtering your words. You are suppressing anger to remain likable. You are suppressing ambition to avoid intimidation. You are suppressing fear to appear competent. And suppression consumes energy. This is why so many people feel exhausted even when they are successful. The exhaustion is not from effort alone. It is from fragmentation, from splitting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable parts. The era you are entering does not reward masks. It rewards integration. Integration means something radical. It means you stop dividing yourself into good and bad. You stop pretending that your anger makes you unworthy. You stop hiding your ambition to make others comfortable. You stop apologizing for your sensitivity as if it were a defect. Instead, you begin to ask, what is this emotion trying to teach me? Your anger may be pointing to violated boundaries. Your jealousy may reveal unclaimed desire. Your fear may highlight an area where growth is necessary. When you integrate these parts consciously, they transform. Anger becomes assertiveness. Fear becomes preparation. Ambition becomes disciplined focus. But when you deny them, they operate from the shadows. They sabotage relationships. They erupt unexpectedly. They create internal conflict that drains your vitality. The mask kept you safe by narrowing you. Integration makes you powerful by expanding you. Consider the person who has always been the strong one, the dependable one, the one who never breaks. For years, that identity earns respect. But privately, they feel unseen. They cannot ask for help without feeling weak. They cannot admit exhaustion without guilt. Eventually, the mask cracks. Burnout, emotional collapse. A relationship that ends because intimacy requires vulnerability they never practiced. This breakdown is not failure. It is a summons. It is life whispering, you no longer need to survive. You are allowed to be whole. Wholeness does not mean perfection. It means alignment. It means your outer life reflects your inner truth. It means you speak when something feels wrong. You rest when you are tired. You pursue what excites you instead of what impresses others. And here is the paradox: when you stop performing for validation, you often become more magnetic. Why? Because authenticity carries weight. People can feel when someone is real. There is less tension in their presence, less need to prove, more groundedness. The world is shifting. Information is abundant. Skills can be learned. But inner coherence, the harmony between who you are and how you live, is rare. This era belongs to those who are integrated. When you stop reacting from childhood strategies and start responding from conscious awareness, you reclaim your agency. You are no longer trying to earn love through performance. You are no longer trying to control chaos through hypervigilance. You are no longer trying to avoid pain through armor. You begin shaping your life intentionally. The mask was necessary once. Honor it. It carried you through storms you did not choose. But you are no longer that powerless child. You are allowed to remove the armor. You are allowed to disappoint people who only loved the performance. You are allowed to redefine yourself beyond survival. The mask kept you alive, but your true self, integrated, aware, unapologetic, is what will make you powerful in the era unfolding before you. You have never had more access to knowledge than you do right now. With a small device in your hand, you can learn business strategies from billionaires, psychology frameworks from experts, meditation techniques from monks, and biohacking routines from elite performers. You can watch lectures, download books, listen to podcasts at double speed. You can consume more information in a week than your ancestors could in a lifetime. And yet, anxiety is rising, depression is rising, loneliness is rising. How is it possible to be so informed and still feel so lost? Because information is external, power is internal. We are living through a silent shift. For decades, success belonged to those who knew more. Degrees, credentials, technical knowledge, these were the currency of advancement. But something is changing. Knowledge has become abundant. It is no longer rare. What is rare now is self-mastery. The next era is not about collecting more data. It is about mastering the instrument through which you experience data, your own mind. Look closely at the people who are rising in this unstable world. They are not always the most talented, not always the most educated, not always the most charismatic. They are the most self-aware. They know their triggers. They understand the stories their mind tells under stress. They recognize when their ego is threatened. They can pause before reacting. They can sit in discomfort without needing immediate relief. This ability to remain conscious in the presence of chaos is becoming a competitive advantage. Consider leadership. Research published by Harvard Business Review consistently highlights that emotional intelligence is a stronger predictor of leadership effectiveness than IQ alone. Leaders who can regulate their emotions, empathize with others, and remain grounded during crisis outperform those who react impulsively. Why? Because in moments of uncertainty, people do not look for the smartest voice in the room. They look for the steadiest. When markets crash, when companies restructure, when conflict erupts, the reactive leader spreads panic. The grounded leader transmits stability, and groundedness is not a personality trait. It is trained self-awareness. Most people today are overstimulated and under-reflective. Their attention is fragmented. Their thoughts are loud. Their nervous systems are overloaded. They consume information constantly, but they rarely sit in silence long enough to observe their inner patterns. Without self-observation, knowledge becomes noise. You can know every strategy for success and still sabotage yourself because you cannot tolerate rejection. You can understand attachment theory and still choose destructive relationships because you have not confronted your fear of abandonment. You can memorize productivity systems and still procrastinate because you are unconsciously afraid of failure. The obstacle is rarely ignorance. It is unconsciousness. Inner mastery begins when you turn your attention inward with the same intensity you once reserved for the outside world. Instead of asking, "What should I learn next?" you begin asking, "What is happening inside me right now? What am I feeling? Why did that comment trigger me? Why do I seek approval from people who cannot give it? Why do I avoid this opportunity, even though I claim I want it?" These questions are uncomfortable. They expose contradiction. They reveal insecurity. They challenge the image you have of yourself. But this confrontation is where power begins. When you understand your triggers, they lose their grip. When you can name your fear, it becomes manageable. When you recognize your projections, you stop blaming others for conflicts that originate within. Emotional regulation is not suppression. It is awareness plus choice. It is the ability to feel anger without being consumed by it, to experience anxiety without obeying it, to face uncertainty without collapsing into panic. And this ability changes everything. In relationships, it creates stability. You stop reacting defensively. You listen more deeply. You respond instead of retaliate. In business, it creates clarity. You make decisions based on long-term vision instead of short-term emotion. In personal growth, it creates momentum. You stop abandoning goals the moment discomfort appears. The future will not be stable. Technology will accelerate. Economies will shift. Social norms will evolve rapidly. In such an environment, technical knowledge alone is insufficient. What will matter is adaptability. And adaptability is rooted in inner flexibility, the capacity to adjust without losing your center. There is a deeper truth beneath all of this. The darkness you avoid externally mirrors the darkness you avoid internally. The chaos you fear in the world reflects the chaos you fear in yourself. But when you turn toward your inner chaos with courage, something remarkable happens. The shadows become maps. The confusion becomes information. The anxiety becomes energy that can be directed. Your power is not in avoiding darkness. It is in commanding it. To command it does not mean to eliminate it. It means to know it intimately, to understand your anger so it becomes conviction, to understand your fear so it becomes discernment, to understand your ambition so it becomes disciplined focus rather than reckless striving. This is inner mastery. It is quieter than achievement, less visible than success, but infinitely more stable. In a world drowning in information, the rarest individual will be the one who has mastered themselves. And when you master yourself, you are no longer at the mercy of trends, crises, or opinions. You become centered in something deeper, something that cannot be downloaded, something that cannot be taken away. A clarity forged not from knowing everything about the world, but from knowing yourself. There will come a season in your life when the noise fades, and you mistake the silence for abandonment. The invitations slow down. The conversations feel shallow. The people who once felt aligned with you now look at you with confusion, sometimes even quiet resistance. You begin setting boundaries, and suddenly you are different. You start changing your habits, your priorities, your mindset, and the very environments that once felt normal now feel suffocating. In that season, it is easy to believe something has gone wrong. It has not. You are not being punished. You are being refined. Isolation is one of the most misunderstood phases of transformation. We are conditioned to fear it. From childhood, belonging equals safety. Acceptance equals survival. To be alone once meant vulnerability to danger. So when we enter a season of solitude, the nervous system panics. It whispers, "You are losing connection. You are at risk." But there is another truth beneath that fear. Every powerful transformation includes isolation. The athlete trains before dawn, long before the crowd arrives. The writer sits alone with blank pages, wrestling with thoughts no one else can see. The innovator spends hours in quiet reflection before presenting an idea that appears effortless to the outside world. The visible victory is public. The forging is private. When the noise fades, something extraordinary begins to happen. At first, it feels uncomfortable. Without constant distraction, you hear your own thoughts more clearly. Doubts echo louder. Old wounds resurface. Questions you once avoided now demand attention. But slowly, beneath the discomfort, you begin to hear something else. Your own voice. Not the voice of your parents. Not the voice of society's expectations. Not the voice of peers projecting their fears. Your voice. Many people go through life without ever truly hearing it. They move from school to career to relationship following scripts handed to them. They stay busy enough to avoid reflection. They mistake external validation for internal clarity. Isolation interrupts that pattern. When you spend intentional time alone, your mind shifts into a different mode. Neuroscientific research shows that during quiet reflection, the brain activates what is known as the default mode network, the system associated with self-awareness, memory integration, and insight. This is not laziness, it is deep processing. It is the psyche reorganizing itself. Solitude, when chosen consciously, enhances creativity and emotional understanding. It allows unresolved experiences to surface and integrate. It gives space for new visions to form. But this process is not glamorous. There will be moments when loneliness feels heavy, when you question whether your growth is worth the distance it creates, when you scroll through images of connection and wonder if you are falling behind. In those moments, remember this, evolution often requires temporary separation from what can no longer hold you. Friends may not understand your new boundaries because your growth disrupts their comfort. Family may resist your independence because it challenges familiar roles. Old environments may feel suffocating because you have outgrown the version of yourself that once fit there. This tension is not evidence that you are wrong. It is evidence that you are changing, and change requires space. Imagine metal being forged. It must endure heat intense enough to alter its structure. It must be separated from impurities. It must be reshaped under pressure. The process is not gentle, but without it, the metal remains brittle. Isolation is that heat. It exposes your dependency on approval. It reveals where you derive identity from others. It confronts you with the question, who am I when no one is watching? This question can feel terrifying. Without applause, without roles, without familiar mirrors, you may feel undefined. But that undefined space is fertile. It is where identity solidifies not from expectation, but from alignment. The era ahead will not reward those who are easily swayed by opinion. It will not reward those who collapse under criticism or chase every trend for belonging. It will demand individuals who know themselves deeply, who can stand alone in their convictions without hostility, who can tolerate solitude without panic. And that depth is not formed in constant distraction. It is formed in silence, in long walks where you confront your thoughts, in evenings where you choose reflection over noise, in moments where you resist the urge to numb discomfort with endless stimulation. Isolation is not the end of connection. It is the purification of it. When you return from this season, and you will, You will not seek relationships out of fear of being alone. You will choose them from strength. You will not tolerate environments that shrink you. You will not perform to maintain belonging. You will connect from wholeness. So if you are in that quiet season now, do not rush to escape it. Do not interpret it as failure. Sit in it. Listen to it. Let it reveal the parts of you that were drowned out by noise. Isolation is not abandonment. It is initiation. It is the forge where distractions burn away and identity hardens into something unshakable. And when the fire cools, you will not emerge lonely. You will emerge solid. There is one truth most people avoid because it threatens the image they have spent years trying to protect. You were taught to be good. Good meant agreeable. Good meant polite. Good meant swallowing anger, hiding ambition, softening your intensity so others would not feel uncomfortable. You learned early which parts of you were praised and which parts were corrected. The parts that fit were encouraged. The parts that disrupted were pushed into the shadows, so you adapted. You suppressed your anger because it made you difficult. You hid your ambition because it seemed arrogant. You avoided confrontation because harmony was safer than honesty. But suppressed energy does not disappear. It waits, and what waits in the dark does not remain neutral. It leaks. It distorts. It sabotages. The anger you refuse to acknowledge becomes passive aggression. It shows up in sarcasm, in subtle withdrawal, in quiet resentment toward people who violate boundaries you never expressed. The ambition you deny becomes envy when you see someone else succeed. The fear you hide becomes anxiety that follows you into every opportunity. You tell yourself you are being mature, but inside there is tension, fragmentation, a split between who you appear to be and what you actually feel. This split drains power. True power is not about becoming ruthless. It is not about abandoning empathy or crushing competition without conscience. That is not integration. That is overcompensation. True power is about wholeness. It is about integrating your shadow, the parts of you that are intense, competitive, dominant, emotional, imperfect. Every human being carries these qualities. The difference between those who thrive and those who implode is not whether they have a shadow. It is whether they know it. When you consciously accept your aggression, something shifts. It stops erupting unpredictably. It stops turning inward as self-hatred. Instead, it becomes assertiveness. The ability to say no without apology. The ability to defend your boundaries without guilt. The ability to pursue what you want without shrinking. When you accept your fear, it stops controlling you from behind the scenes. It becomes caution, discernment, strategic awareness. Fear acknowledged becomes intelligence. Fear denied becomes paralysis. When you accept your ambition, it transforms from restless craving into disciplined drive. You stop chasing success to prove your worth. You begin building because you genuinely desire growth. There is a difference between striving from insecurity and striving from integration. Most people oscillate between extremes. They are either too soft or too hard, too passive or too aggressive, too accommodating or too domineering. But the individuals who will thrive in this era are not the softest or the hardest. They are the most integrated. They can be compassionate and firm. They can listen deeply while still holding their ground. They can collaborate without losing their authority. They can walk away when necessary without hatred in their heart. They are empathetic and strategic, calm and dangerous when necessary. This is not contradiction. It is balance. Imagine someone who has denied their anger their entire life. They pride themselves on being easygoing. But when pushed too far, they explode. The explosion shocks everyone, including themselves. Why? Because the anger was never integrated. It was imprisoned. And imprisoned energy eventually revolts. Now imagine someone who has faced their anger consciously. They understand what triggers it. They know what values it protects. They express it early, clearly, without cruelty. There is no explosion because there is no repression. That is integration. The same applies to ambition. A person who denies ambition may criticize others who succeed. They mask desire with moral superiority. But the unclaimed drive turns into quiet dissatisfaction. Meanwhile, the integrated individual admits, yes, I want to build something significant. They do not apologize for their hunger, but they channel it with discipline. They do not destroy others to win. They compete with themselves. They measure growth by alignment, not applause. Integration dissolves internal war, and internal peace creates external power, because when you are no longer fighting parts of yourself, you conserve energy. You move with clarity. You make decisions without the constant interference of hidden motives. This era is unstable. It rewards adaptability, authenticity, psychological depth. Surface level personas cannot sustain pressure. Eventually, the cracks show, but a whole person, someone who has met their darkness and made peace with it, is resilient. Criticism does not shatter them because they already know their flaws. Success does not inflate them because they understand their shadow. Failure does not destroy them because their identity is not built on perfection. They are grounded. And grounded individuals are difficult to manipulate. The invitation before you is not to eliminate your darkness. It is to turn toward it with courage, to ask, what part of me have I rejected in order to be acceptable? To reclaim that part, not recklessly but consciously. Your intensity is not your enemy. Your ambition is not your sin. Your anger is not your flaw. Unexamined, they can control you. Integrated, they empower you. Wholeness is not about becoming light without shadow. It is about becoming light that understands its own darkness. And when you are no longer fragmented, when the pleasing self, the ambitious self, the fearful self, the assertive self are no longer at war, you become something rare. You become internally aligned. And a person who is internally aligned moves through the world with a quiet, unmistakable power, not because they are perfect, but because they are whole. You look back at your life and see chaos, heartbreak, humiliation, failure. But what if that was construction? What if every moment that almost broke you was shaping the nervous system, awareness, and strength required for the era unfolding now? This world is unstable. Economies shift. Technology accelerates. Social norms transform overnight. The people who survive will adapt. The people who thrive will integrate. You were built in pain, but you were designed for power, and the era they never prepared you for is the one you were secretly being prepared for all along.